On a cold evening inside the Orion Heights finance tower, a black janitor quietly pushed his cleaning cart down the empty hallway. Suddenly, he heard heavy breathing, soft sobs, and the sound of something falling from conference room C. Looking through the frosted glass, he saw an intern breaking down under the weight of his work. After a brief hesitation, he stepped inside, gently pointed out the mistakes in the intern's report, and quietly left. He had no idea that the next morning, the CEO would see everything, and what happened afterward could change his life forever. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. His boots struck the sidewalk with a soft thud. Worn leather resoled twice. His jeans were faded and patched near the knees. His work shirt buttoned to the top tucked in clean. His frame was lean, his shoulders strong but tired, and his hands, dark calloused, cracked at the knuckles, told a story long before he opened his mouth. A man who worked, a man who endured. Elijah didn't glance up at the tower right away. He already knew what it looked like. Orion Heights loomed above the city like a monument to power. 47 stories of glass and marble lit from within by people who never had to clean up after themselves. He had passed it every week for 2 years before finally walking through those doors. Tonight was his first shift. The motion sensor at the entrance triggered before he reached it, and the doors slid open with a hiss. Light spilled out onto the sidewalk, cool, bright, almost sterile. It felt like walking into someone else's world. He took a breath, stepped in, and for a second he wished he hadn't worn his oldest coat. But coats don't feed your daughter. Work does. The lobby of Orion Heights was silent, empty, except for a single receptionist behind a sleek white counter. The floor gleamed like polished ice beneath Elijah's boots. Every corner smelled faintly of citrus disinfectant and ambition. A massive sculpture of twisted chrome hovered above the center atrium like it had somewhere more important to be. The receptionist didn't look up when she spoke. Janitorial access is through the rear elevator, down the left hallway. Her tone was flat, uninterested, like she was giving directions to furniture. Elijah nodded once quiet. "Thank you." He turned without complaint and made his way toward the hallway. He'd been through this routine at the interview. Night shifts, good pay, no benefits, no questions. That was fine. He wasn't here for benefits. He was here for Amara, 9 years old. Brown eyes too big for her face, always asking questions like, if the moon is round, why does it sometimes look like a banana? That girl meant everything. Elijah didn't need much, but she did. School shoes, lunches that didn't come from a shelter box, a heater that worked. So here he was. The rear hallway was dimmer, less polished. The elevators were steel gray utilitarian. He punched the call button and waited. His reflection in the brushed metal door looked older than 35. Maybe it was the eyes. Maybe it was the silence. When the elevator opened, he stepped inside and hit the button for sub-level 2. Janitorial lockers, supplies, the forgotten spaces of the tower. As the doors closed, Elijah let out the breath he'd been holding since he stepped off the bus. He didn't like being watched. Even when no one looked directly at him, he knew what they saw: black. Working class, male, alone. He had been followed in stores, asked if he was lost in school buildings, called sir in a tone that meant you don't belong here. But he had learned a long time ago how to carry himself. Back straight, voice calm, eyes alert. The world didn't owe him comfort. He didn't expect it. The locker room was quiet when he arrived. A row of metal lockers, a single wooden bench. He found the one with his name taped on it, Brooks Elijah. He opened it, pulled out the uniform shirt with the Orion logo stitched over the chest, changed quickly, rolled his sleeves to the elbows, tied his boots tight. Then he picked up the laminated checklist from the wall and read floors 4 through 9. Trash, vacuum, bathroom check, supply restock, standard. As he stepped out into the hallway, pushing the cleaning cart in front of him, he passed a mirror near the exit. He caught his own eyes again, dark, wide set, worn. Amara had told him once, "Daddy, your eyes look like they miss someone." He hadn't answered, but she was right. He missed Claire. His late wife had passed just over 3 years ago. Breast cancer, aggressive. They had fought like hell, but the fight ended in a hospital room on a Thursday morning with her hand in his, and her last words whispering, "Don't disappear." He didn't. But grief doesn't always look like tears. Sometimes it looks like night shifts and used textbooks and pretending pancakes fix everything. Elijah pushed the cart into the elevator again and rode up to the 4th floor. The air changed as he ascended, the lighting brighter, the hallways more pristine, the kind of place where people had assistants for their assistants. He started his routine. Empty bins, wipe down desks, check supply closets. He worked quickly, but with care, not rushed. He was methodical, always had been. In another life, he had been an engineer. A damn good one. Patents under his name. Problem solver, systems builder. But none of that paid the bills when hospitals kept sending invoices and your daughter woke up screaming because she missed her mama. So here he was, fixing other people's messes. At 11:15, Elijah paused for a water break. The hallway was silent, the only sound a faint buzz from the lights overhead. He leaned against the cart, took a sip from his thermos, and looked out the tall window that overlooked the city. It was beautiful in that cold way cities are at night. Thousands of lights blinking like the stars had settled into office cubicles. He wondered if Amara had finished her reading log for the week. Then came the voice from behind him. You knew Elijah turned slowly. A man in a suit leaned against the doorway of an office tie. Loosened jacket gone, sleeves rolled. He was younger, maybe late 20s, hair slicked back, holding a half-empty energy drink. Yeah, Elijah said evenly. First night. The man nodded. Hope you don't mind cleaning up after adults who act like toddlers. You'll find half the trash in here is emotional. Elijah gave a small smile. Trash is trash. It all gets taken out. The man laughed. Fair enough. He disappeared back into the office. Elijah turned back to his cart, but for the next minute, he just stood there. In the reflection of the glass, he saw the weight on his own shoulders. A man doing a job far below what he'd once trained for. A man raising a daughter alone. A man whose past didn't buy him passes anymore. But he showed up, because that's what fathers do. Not perfect, not powerful, just present. And in a world that rarely saw men like him, black, working, grieving, devoted, he had learned to carry both pride and pain in silence. He picked up the mop and started again. No one clapped, no one noticed. But somewhere in a small apartment across town, a little girl slept peacefully in her bed, her book still open on the last page her daddy had read aloud, and that was reason enough to keep going. The clock on the hallway wall blinked 11:42 when Elijah pushed his cart onto the 29th floor. It was one of the mid-executive levels filled with offices that bore titles like junior strategy consultant and analyst team lead, and people who stayed too late hoping someone noticed their hustle. The floor was unusually quiet. The lights were dimmed to half power, casting a muted glow over the rows of glass-walled offices and cubicles. Most desks were dark computers asleep. Elijah moved with his usual rhythm, measured, deliberate quiet. He emptied 2 trash cans, wiped down a kitchenette counter, replaced a leaking water jug with practiced ease. As he approached conference room C, he heard its soft, quick gasps, followed by a muffled thump. At first, he thought it might be the HVAC system acting up again, but when he stepped closer to the frosted glass wall, he saw a figure inside. Someone was sitting at the end of the long table, shoulders hunched, head in his hands. Elijah paused. It was a white kid, early 20s maybe. Pale skin, light brown hair in a business-cut dress shirt, rumpled sleeves, rolled halfway tie loosened. Papers were scattered across the table. An open laptop blinked sleepily to one side, and next to him, on the carpet, a coffee mug lay shattered, its contents soaking into the fibers. The kid looked broken. Elijah's first instinct was to keep moving. He was just the janitor. This wasn't his world. He didn't belong in meetings, didn't offer advice to interns in tailored pants and company email accounts. His job was to clean, not comfort. He took one step past the door. Then he stopped. Amara's voice came to him clear, like it had only been said 5 minutes ago. Daddy, you said if someone looks lost, we help, even if they don't ask. He stood there for a second longer, unsure. Then he turned, stepped back to the door, and tapped the glass gently with his knuckle. The kid flinched. His head jerked up, eyes, red cheeks flushed. He looked embarrassed, caught like a child crying in class. Elijah opened the door just a crack. You all right? He asked, voice low. The kid sniffled and wiped at his face with his sleeve. Yeah, I screwed up. That's all? Elijah nodded slowly. Looks like a rough night. The kid let out a sharp laugh. I spent 3 weeks putting together a pitch deck for the senior partners. My formatting's off, my calculations are inconsistent, and my supervisor said I might have just killed my chances of getting hired full-time. He rubbed his eyes hard, clearly trying not to cry again. I don't even know why I thought I could do this, he muttered. I'm not like the others here. Elijah stepped inside the room. Carefully, respectfully. He looked at the laptop. The deck was open. Slide thumbnails lined one side. Graphs and charts in clean corporate fonts. "You mind if I take a look?" Elijah asked. The kid hesitated, then nodded, too tired to pretend he didn't need help. Elijah walked around the table and sat beside him. The kid slid the laptop over. Elijah scanned quickly. "Your data's not bad," he said. "This chart here, it needs contrast. White text on light blue won't read on the projector. And on slide 7, your date is wrong. February 31st isn't real." The kid blinked. "Oh, damn." Elijah gave him a calm smile. "I don't know much about finance, but I've worked on more presentations than I can count. And I've had to fix worse." "You've done presentations, yeah," Elijah said simply. "Different job, different life." The kid didn't ask what kind of life. He just nodded. For the next 15 minutes, they worked together. Elijah adjusted the formatting. The kid corrected the figures. They didn't talk much. Just typed, clicked, double-checked. Elijah felt the tension in the room ease little by little. The kid's shoulders relaxed. His breathing slowed. The sense of panic that had clung to him like sweat began to lift. When they finished, Elijah stood and moved around the room. He erased the whiteboard, picked up the shards of the mug, and wiped down the table. Before leaving, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small sticky note. He wrote something on it in neat handwriting, then stuck it gently on the edge of the kid's monitor. "You're gonna be fine," he said. "Sleep if you can." Then he turned and walked out. The kid sat in silence for a moment, then leaned in and read the note. "You are more than one bad day. Keep going." He stared at it for a long time. Outside, Elijah returned to his cart. He rolled it down the hallway, eyes forward. His break was over, but something in his chest felt lighter. The world hadn't changed. The job was still the same. But tonight, he had done more than clean a floor. He had reached into a place he didn't belong simply because someone looked lost. And that mattered. He didn't do it for recognition. There was no applause waiting at the end of the hallway. No promotion. No handshake. But in a building where people climb ladders by stepping over others, he had chosen to kneel beside someone instead. Because Amara deserved a father who didn't just talk about kindness. She deserved to see it in motion. That was the kind of legacy Elijah believed in. Not titles, not plaques, just presence. The kind that says, "I see you even when no one else does." And for Zachary, the intern whose future had felt like it was falling apart in a corporate meeting room at midnight, that note would be the first thing he saw the next morning. And it would stay on his monitor for months, maybe longer. Because small kindnesses don't always make the news, but they do change people. At precisely 6:45 the next morning, Veronica Hale stepped into Conference Room C on the 29th floor of Orion Heights. The lights buzzed softly, motion sensors flicking them on, just a half second too late for her liking. Her heels clicked in rhythm against the polished tile as she moved straight toward the table where a neat stack of intern presentations waited. She did not sit. She remained standing as she skimmed through the reports, flipping pages one by one with a quiet efficiency. Her assistant Mary Ann had printed and pre-arranged everything the night before like always. Veronica preferred physical copies. Digital clutter annoyed her. Her eyes stopped at one document. She frowned. It was Zachary's. Yesterday, the same report had been a mess. Charts, misaligned numbers off margins, chaotic. She remembered snapping at the boy in front of the floor, telling him he clearly wasn't ready. She hadn't meant to crush him, just to sharpen him. That was the nature of the world. If you couldn't take pressure, you shouldn't apply for power. But now, the formatting was clean. The data was corrected. The structure was clear. Veronica slowly flipped through the pages again, slower this time. Then her eyes caught it on the corner of the conference table beside the laptop dock. A small, yellow sticky note. 4 words, in clean handwriting. "You are more than one bad day. Keep going." She stared at it for a long time. The handwriting wasn't Zachary's, and it wasn't any of the other interns either. No logo, no title, just an initial. Veronica straightened. Her pulse tapped a little harder against her wrist. This wasn't just a note. It was a shift. An interruption in the rhythm of the building, a place where kindness was rare and usually performed for an audience. She pressed the intercom on the wall. "Mary Ann, I want surveillance footage from last night, between 9 and midnight. Conference Room C." A brief pause. "Yes, ma'am. Any specific reason?" "No," Veronica replied, voice flat. "Just curious." She ended the call. Curious. That wasn't a word she used often, but this it didn't fit. Not in her world. Not in this building. People didn't fix things quietly. They fixed them loudly, publicly. to be seen. 10 minutes later, she sat alone in her office, the blinds half-open, city light diffusing into the room in soft blues. She opened the security feed on her desktop, rewound the timeline. There he was. A man in a dark blue janitor uniform entered the room at 9:47. He paused at the door, tapped the glass, then stepped inside. He wasn't rushed, didn't fidget. His movements were deliberate, like he knew where he stood and didn't need to explain why. He sat beside Zachary. They worked together for about 15 minutes. No one else came in. No words were captured on the mute footage, but the body language was easy to read. The man wasn't performing. He was helping. Veronica leaned closer, narrowing her eyes at the screen. She paused. The feed zoomed in on the man's face. Brown skin, high cheekbones, trim beard, lean, focused. She recognized him. She had seen him once or twice in passing, always late at night pushing a cart down the hallway. Elijah Brooks, night staff, janitorial team. Veronica sat back. A janitor. She stared at the screen, then at the sticky note still on her desk. People didn't do things like this. Not without some angle. Not in her world. And yet, there he was. Calm, helpful, gone without asking for anything. Her chest tightened just slightly. She stood and walked over to the tall glass window behind her desk. Down below, the morning crowd was pouring through the front plaza suits, laptops, paper cups with $5 coffee. Just another Thursday. She folded the sticky note carefully and slipped it into the inside pocket of her blazer. For a long moment, she said nothing, just stood there watching the city move. Why would he do that? The question stayed with her throughout the day. She dismissed meetings early. She skipped lunch. By afternoon, her assistant offered her a salad, and she barely touched it. Back in her office, she pulled up the building directory and searched the name. Brooks Elijah. Basic profile. Hired 4 months ago. No prior positions listed. Address in the East Side, low-income housing complex. No emergency contact. Nothing in the file stood out. But something about him did. She tapped her fingers lightly on the desk. It wasn't the act itself that disturbed her. It was how quiet it had been. How unexpected. Veronica had spent a lifetime learning to expect motives. Her father, cold, brilliant, terrifying, taught her that nothing was free. Every kindness had a cost. Every smile hid calculation. Love, he once told her, is leverage with a ribbon on it. She believed that. Had built her empire on it. Until now. Until a man with no reason to care left a message that felt more human than anything she had heard in months. That night, long after the building had emptied, Veronica remained in her office. She removed her blazer, loosened her heels, and sat on the floor beside the wide window, knees pulled close. She took out the note again. Read it once. Then again. You are more than one bad day. Keep going. E. She didn't cry. She didn't smile either. But something moved, something cracked just enough to let air in, because Veronica Hale had been surrounded by sharp minds her entire life. But tonight, it was the quiet presence of a janitor, a black man no one had thought twice about, that stayed with her. And for reasons she couldn't yet name, she wasn't ready to forget him. The night shift moved differently. By 10 p.m., the Orion Heights tower had exhaled the last of its daytime noise. Phones stopped ringing. Elevators stopped chiming. The click of heels faded into silence, and what remained were the whispers, the hum of overhead lights, the occasional distant cough from security, the faint echo of a rolling mop bucket in a corridor no one remembered during daylight. Elijah Brooks liked this part of the night, not because it was peaceful, though it was. He liked it because it was honest. No performance, no meetings, no talking in circles, just problems and the simple act of fixing them. On the 22nd floor, he stopped in front of a storage closet that wasn't on his checklist. He adjusted the strap on his back brace, grabbed his flashlight, and opened the door. Inside, boxes leaned at awkward angles. A loose tile shifted under his boot. He knelt and slid his fingers along the baseboard. There it was. Another mousetrap expired weeks ago, bait dried out. He replaced it with a fresh one from his cart, made a note on the clipboard, and closed the door without a sound. Then he moved on. The men's restroom on the 23rd floor had a leak under sink number 2. No one had filed a work order. No one ever did. But Elijah noticed it the night before when he spotted the faint ring of water on the floor and heard the soft drip, drip, drip behind the panel. Tonight he brought a wrench. 15 minutes later, the seal was tightened. The floor was dry and the sink ran smooth. He didn't mention it to anyone. Didn't need to. By midnight, he was on the 27th floor restocking paper towels in a break room with a flickering fluorescent light. It buzzed just slightly off-pitch enough to drive someone mad if they had to sit under it long enough. Most wouldn't notice, but Elijah did. He slid the panel cover off, removed the bulb, and replaced it with one from his cart. The hum stopped. He exhaled softly. At 1 a.m., he passed the desk of Evelyn in accounting, an older black woman who always brought in her own tea bags and had 2 framed photos of her grandkids beside her keyboard. Elijah had never spoken to her, but he'd seen her wince once when sitting down. That was why he had tightened her chair's left armrest last week. She hadn't noticed, but she stopped wincing. That was enough. He continued on. A printer on the 26th floor had been marked awaiting IT support for nearly 2 weeks. The tray jammed constantly. Elijah had watched 3 different people curse at it and walk away in frustration. It still hadn't shown. Tonight, he opened it, cleared the rollers, and fixed the feeder with a twist of his screwdriver. He left a note on top, all clear now. Sometimes machines just need a little grace. Veronica Hale was watching. Not in the way people watched through cameras. She wasn't monitoring him like a supervisor. She was observing quietly from the corners of her own world. Over the last week, she had started arriving at the office earlier than usual, sometimes at 6 a.m., sometimes even earlier. When she did, she'd walk the halls alone under the same lights he had walked under just hours before. She noticed the sink no longer leaked. The coffee cabinet restocked even though no one asked. The light outside her assistant's cubicle no longer flickered. She didn't say anything, but she noticed. One morning, she found a rolling chair that used to squeak every time she leaned forward, silent, smooth, balanced. She never asked how it happened, but she knew. It was him, Elijah Brooks, the janitor who worked like he wasn't being watched, who fixed things like the building belonged to him, who didn't need permission to care. And for Veronica, that was foreign. She had spent decades surrounded by people who made suggestions only when there were promotions on the line, people who volunteered for initiatives when executives were present, people who learned early how to speak the language of power. But Elijah never asked to be heard. He simply showed up. She thought about that as she sat at her desk one evening, long after sunset, watching the city flicker outside her window. The office around her was dark. Her lamp cast a small pool of warm light across her paperwork. She picked up her tablet to check her calendar and paused when she saw the message pop up from facilities maintenance log updated. Floor 27 light replaced, water line stabilized, break room microwave outlet rewired. None of these were in the nightly assignments. She scrolled down. Signed E. Brooks. Veronica set the tablet down. She thought of her father, then Charles Hale, the man who raised her to believe that loyalty only existed in contracts and effort was a currency you never gave away for free. You want something in this world, he used to say, you either buy it, earn it, or steal it. Nobody hands you anything. Elijah hadn't bought his kindness. He hadn't earned recognition. He hadn't stolen attention. He just fixed things quietly. Steadily. Veronica stood from her desk and walked out into the hallway. It was 1:40 in the morning. She had stayed late reviewing budget forecasts. She wore a light sweater now instead of her usual blazer, her hair tied back in a simple knot. She headed to the executive kitchen for tea. As she stepped out of the elevator on the 34th floor, she saw him, Elijah. He was down the hall wiping the glass edge of the conference room door. His movements were slow but purposeful. He didn't see her at first. She didn't speak. She just watched. He finished the glass, stepped back, checked for smudges, and adjusted a coaster on the table inside that had been left off-center. Only then did he glance up. Their eyes met. He nodded. She nodded back. Working late, he said, voice low, respectful. Could say the same, she replied. He gestured toward the kitchenette. Tea cabinets stocked. Green teas in the blue tin. Bottom shelf now, figured that's where people look first. She raised an eyebrow. You remember that I remember what helps people breathe easier. She didn't respond right away. Then softly she said, most of my managers don't remember half of what you just said. He gave a small shrug. It's easier to fix what you respect. A long silence hung between them. It wasn't awkward. It was full. Finally, Veronica said, have a good night, Mr. Brooks. You too, Miss Hale. She turned and walked away. He returned to his cart. That night, when she got home, Veronica sat at her dining table and stared at her untouched dinner. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. She took the sticky note from her pocket, the one she still hadn't thrown away. You are more than one bad day. Keep going. And for the first time in years, she whispered something out loud just to herself. Maybe some people don't need a title to matter, because the truth was simple. Not every leader stands at the front of the room. Sometimes they push a cart through empty hallways, fixing what's broken, silently reminding the world what care looks like when no one's looking. It began with a flicker. At 4:15 a.m., just before the building's internal systems transitioned to daytime mode, the server room on the 34th floor experienced a power fluctuation. Then the backup systems failed. Security cameras dropped offline. Emergency lights flickered once, then stayed on longer than they should have. And the call that was supposed to happen at 4:30 sharp with a Tokyo-based investment partner was cut off mid-sentence. By the time the systems rebooted, the deal was dead. $12 million gone in seconds. By 8 a.m., the executive floor of Orion Heights was silent in a way that didn't feel peaceful. It felt like the hush before a verdict. People avoided eye contact. Phones were set to silent. Executives whispered in doorways, and the air was tight with the smell of fresh coffee and rising tension. Veronica Hale had just stepped out of an emergency board meeting when her assistant approached. "Ma'am, facilities requested you be informed. Internal review has flagged a possible personnel link. Elijah Brooks." Veronica stopped walking. What the assistant shifted. He was the last person logged near the electrical closet connected to the server relay, 34th floor. Less than an hour before the failure. Veronica didn't answer. She just turned. Downstairs, Elijah had just finished helping Amara zip up her jacket. It was 7:45. She had a paper bag lunch in one hand and a small library book in the other. "Chapter 5, he asked gently, adjusting her backpack. "Chapter 7, she smiled proudly. "You're ahead," he said, and for a moment he forgot everything else. Then his radio buzzed. "Mr. Brooks, please report to Office 34B immediately." The voice was clipped, not Veronica's. He frowned. "Hold tight, baby. I'll be right back." Amara nodded and sat in the corner of the lobby, legs tucked up under her on the chair book already open. Elijah took the service elevator to the top. When he entered Office 34B, 3 people were waiting. 2 white men in suits and a woman he didn't recognize. Their faces were hard to read, but not friendly. "Mr. Brooks," one of the men said, gesturing toward the empty chair across the desk. "We need to talk about what happened early this morning." Elijah didn't sit. He folded his arms. "There was a systems failure," the second man said. "It triggered security issues and shut down our main call infrastructure. We lost a high-value deal." The woman slid a folder across the desk. "These are the internal logs. You're the only employee who accessed the maintenance panel near the relay node during that window." Elijah glanced at the paper, then back at them. "I was fixing a hallway light," he said, steady. "The same one that's been flickering for weeks." "You're not certified to work on electrical panels," the first man countered. "It says here the access was unauthorized." "I didn't touch the panel," Elijah replied, voice low but firm. "I replaced a faulty switch. It's not connected to the relay." The woman didn't blink. "We're placing you on immediate suspension pending investigation. Please turn in your badge." There was a silence that felt like the room had dropped 10 degrees. Elijah's jaw tensed. His hands were clenched at his sides. But he didn't raise his voice. He didn't yell. He just nodded once and reached for the badge clipped to his belt. He placed it on the table carefully, then turned without a word and left. Back in the lobby, Amara looked up as he approached. Her eyes scanned his face before he said anything. She saw the badge was gone. She saw the heaviness in his steps. "Daddy?" she asked quietly. Elijah knelt in front of her. He placed his hands gently on her shoulders. "We're going home early today, sweetheart." Why, he tried to smile. "They just need to figure something out, that's all." But the smile didn't reach his eyes. And Amara, all of 9 years old, closed her book without another word. She clutched it to her chest and followed him to the door, her footsteps smaller, slower. Upstairs, in a glass-walled office, Veronica Hale watched them leave. Her coffee sat cold on her desk. She hadn't spoken to Elijah that morning. She hadn't defended him. And now he was gone. Her stomach twisted. She turned away from the window. Later that afternoon, Veronica passed by Office 34B. Inside, she heard voices. "Fired the janitor," one of the men said. "We don't need liabilities right now." She froze, her hand on the doorframe. Then she turned and stepped in. "What did you just say?" The room went still. The younger man blinked. Miss Hale. We were just updating internal reports. Did you fire Elijah Brooks?" Her voice was calm but sharp enough to cut. "Well, the second man said he was the only one near the system panel. We had to act fast. He's not authorized. Did you check the backup relay logs? She interrupted. The room fell silent. Did you verify timestamps? Did you ask anyone from engineering, or were you just looking for someone expendable? The woman shifted in her seat. There was urgency. We know. Veronica said flatly. You didn't check. You just assumed. Because he's night staff. Because he's easy to blame. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Reverse the suspension immediately. And do not make another personnel decision in this building without it going through me. She turned and left. Her hands were shaking. That night, Elijah sat at the small kitchen table in their apartment. Amara colored quietly in the corner. He hadn't told her what really happened. Not yet. But she knew. Kids always do. He stared at the counter, at the list of bills stacked neatly under the magnet on the fridge. He thought of Claire. He thought of how hard they had fought to build a life for Amara, how many sacrifices they had made, how many times he had swallowed pride to do what was right. And now this. Suspended, humiliated, blamed, because he was near a switch, because he wore a uniform, because no one in that room had taken a second to see him, just a black man in a janitor's shirt present at the wrong place at the wrong time. It wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last. But damn if it didn't hurt worse when your daughter was watching, when the most important pair of eyes in your life saw the world remind you you didn't belong. Elijah closed his eyes and sat there in silence, trying to breathe through the anger, through the shame, through the exhaustion of having to be stronger than he should ever have to be. Across town in her penthouse, Veronica Hale couldn't sleep. She paced her kitchen in slippers, a mug in hand untouched. On her desk sat the sticky note again. She picked it up. Read it one more time. You are more than one bad day. Keep going. E. And for the first time in a very long time, she whispered out loud, they were wrong about you. The rain had been falling since noon. Slow, steady, unrelenting. By the time it reached 5 p.m., the sidewalks of Easton Ridge were covered in puddles and streaks of oil. It was the kind of evening that soaked into your bones if you stood still too long. Veronica Hale didn't like rain. She didn't like waiting either. And yet here she was, standing in the hallway of a low-rise apartment complex, a manila folder under her arm, wearing a gray trench coat that hadn't seen water in over a decade. She looked at the apartment number again, 2C. The door was plain. The kind of door no one looked twice at. But behind it lived a man who had quietly changed the entire rhythm of her company, and she'd let them suspend him like he was nothing. Veronica swallowed hard, then knocked. Footsteps. Slow, cautious. The door opened. Elijah stood there in a dark t-shirt and jeans. His expression was unreadable at first, tired, guarded. He didn't speak. Veronica met his eyes. Elijah. A beat passed. Miss Hale. Another pause. She cleared her throat. May I come in for a minute? He hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside the apartment was small but warm. A second-hand couch, a stack of library books, a modest kitchen with a flickering light over the stove. Amara wasn't there, likely still at her after-school program. Veronica stood awkwardly near the doorway. You didn't have to come all the way here, Elijah said. I did. He turned to face her, arms folded across his chest, not defensive, just waiting. Veronica pulled the folder from under her arm and held it out. We reviewed everything. The logs, the relay system, the electrical panel. It wasn't you. The failure was caused by a faulty surge capacitor. It's part of the original infrastructure installed over 15 years ago. We missed it in the last retrofit. She handed him the folder. Elijah didn't reach for it. He just watched her. Veronica exhaled. You were right. You were blamed without evidence. And it was wrong. Elijah finally spoke. I told them that room had nothing to do with the main relay. They didn't want to hear it. His voice was calm, but his jaw was tight. Veronica looked down for a moment, then back at him. I know. Silence stretched between them. I'm sorry, she said. Not because you asked for an apology, but because you deserve one. It was the first time in years she had spoken those words and meant them. Elijah finally reached for the folder, glanced inside, then placed it on the small dining table. And his voice was even. Veronica didn't flinch. I reinstated your position with full back pay. The board will issue a written apology. Elijah nodded once, then turned away to pour 2 glasses of water. He didn't offer her one. You want something else, he said. Veronica didn't deny it. I want to offer you a different role. Something new. Something that actually reflects what you've already been doing quietly, consistently, without asking. She stepped forward. We're restructuring our internal systems. Facility optimization, workflow, integrity, human-centered repair. You'd be leading it. Flexible hours. Same pay as mid-management. No office politics. He looked at her surprised. You want me to fix the building? I want you to fix what people won't admit is broken. He didn't respond right away. Veronica's voice softened. You're the first person in a long time who's made me question how we treat the people who hold everything together. She paused. I don't know if that means anything to you, but it means something to me. Elijah set down the glass, then walked over to the window. He stood there for a moment, arms crossed, watching the rain slide down the glass. When he spoke, his voice was low. You know what bothered me the most? She waited. They didn't ask. They didn't even look me in the eye. Just 3 people in suits deciding who's disposable. Because I was there. Because I'm black. Because I work nights. Because they thought no one would notice if I disappeared. Veronica didn't interrupt. They didn't care that I had a daughter sitting downstairs waiting on her dad, reading a book while they took my job away like it was nothing. His voice cracked just barely. Veronica stepped closer. You're right. He turned. I don't need charity. I'm not offering it, she said. I'm offering trust and a chance to lead. Not because of what you did wrong, but because of everything you've done right. Another silence. This one less sharp. Elijah looked down at his hands. I never wanted to climb anything again. I walked away from all of that after Claire died. I chose quiet, chose peace. I know, she said, but peace doesn't mean invisibility. He added, no, she said, it doesn't. He looked at her again. Really looked. Not as a CEO, not as a woman in charge, just as someone trying awkwardly but honestly to do right. I'll come back, Elijah said, but on one condition. What's that? You don't forget this, what they did, how easy it was. Veronica nodded. I won't. He walked her to the door. She paused, hand on the knob. Elijah, he turned. Thank you for not raising your voice, for not making it worse. Elijah gave her a look that was equal parts tired and clear. I shouldn't have to scream to be believed. Veronica's eyes dropped. You're right. Outside, the rain had slowed. As she stepped into it, Veronica felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Inside, Elijah picked up the folder, then went to sit at the table where Amara usually did her homework. He opened the page titled New Role Proposal. Read it, then smiled just a little, because maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't unchangeable. And maybe leadership wasn't about being right the first time, but about being willing to make it right when it mattered. The morning started like any other. Elijah Brooks held Amara's hand as they stepped through the glass doors of Orion Heights. The lobby smelled faintly of lemon polish and coffee, and the echo of morning shoes on tile filled the vast space. Amara's fingers curled around a small paper bag tied with a blue ribbon. Inside, Elijah had packed her favorite sandwich and a cookie with extra chocolate chips. She looked up at him. You don't have to tell anyone it's my birthday, okay? He raised a brow. Not even June at the front desk. Nope, Amara said, eyes serious. I don't want people singing or asking if I got presents. I just want it to be a regular day. Elijah smiled softly. Your secret's safe. What Amara didn't know was that someone else had already found out. 2 days earlier, Veronica Hale had walked past the front desk and caught sight of a small doodled card pinned to the corkboard behind June's chair. It was a crayon drawing 3 stick figures under a tree with the words Our Day written in uneven handwriting. That's sweet, Veronica commented casually. Lily gave it to me. June smiled. Well, Amara, really. She goes by Lily sometimes. Today's her birthday. Veronica blinked. It is. June nodded. She didn't want a party, just a quiet lunch with her dad. Veronica walked away without replying. But she didn't forget. By noon that day, the rooftop garden of Orion Heights had been quietly transformed. It wasn't grand. Veronica didn't do balloons or glitter, but it was intentional. String lights were gently strung along the pergola poles. A small table was set beneath blooming pots of lavender and yellow marigolds. In the center sat a modest chocolate cake with rainbow sprinkles and a single candle. 2 wrapped books sat beside it, one classic one, a brand new release from Amara's favorite fantasy series. Someone had set a little Bluetooth speaker behind the planter, playing soft instrumental piano. Veronica stood beside the table, awkward in jeans and a soft blue blouse. She checked her watch, then checked the cake, then checked her phone, though she hadn't received a call in 10 minutes. Finally, she pressed a button on her earpiece. Mr. Brooks, she said calmly, would you bring Amara to the rooftop west stairwell? She hung up before Elijah could answer. When they arrived, Amara froze at the top step. Her eyes went wide. The lights, the flowers, the cake. and Veronica, standing there like she didn't know what to do with her hands. Amara whispered, "Is this for me?" Elijah looked at Veronica stunned. Veronica gave a small nod. "Happy birthday, Amara. I read somewhere the best gifts don't come in boxes. But I cheated a little." She handed over the 2 books. Amara held them like they were treasure. Elijah stepped closer, the voice quiet. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble." "I wanted to," Veronica said simply. There was no speech, no crowd, just the 3 of them and the sound of the wind tugging gently at the string lights. They sat together at the table. Elijah passed out sandwiches. Veronica poured lemonade into paper cups. Amara took a bite of her cake and licked frosting from her thumb. "This is really good," she said. "I didn't bake it," Veronica admitted. "I'm terrible at baking." Amara giggled. "That's okay. This is already the best birthday ever." Elijah watched her laugh, her eyes shining, her face relaxed, and he felt something tighten in his throat. It wasn't about the cake. It was about being seen, cared for, acknowledged in a place where they had once been invisible. Amara leaned across the table, her small arms stretching. "Thank you, Miss Hale." Veronica froze for a second, then let Amara wrap her arms around her neck. And for a brief, fragile moment, Veronica Hale, the cold, composed CEO of Orion Heights, almost cried. Not because of sadness, but because this girl, this tiny person with chocolate on her lips and a heart too big for the world, trusted her. And Veronica hadn't earned that trust with a resume. She'd earned it by showing up. Later, when the food was mostly gone and the sun had started to dip behind the skyline, Amara told stories about books, about her mom, about how Elijah always did voices when reading aloud, but denied it afterward. Veronica listened, really listened. Her posture eased, her shoulders lowered, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she had to be in charge of anything. She just sat. At one point, Amara looked at her and asked, "Do you have a favorite book?" Veronica hesitated, then said, "I used to, when I was your age." "A Wrinkle in Time." Amara gasped. "That's on my list." "You have a list. It's color-coded," Elijah muttered. "Of course she does." They laughed. When it was time to leave, Amara hugged Veronica again. This time, Veronica hugged back. Elijah stood beside her quiet. As Amara ran ahead to press the elevator button, he turned to Veronica. "You didn't have to do this. I know. It meant something." She looked at him. "Good." A pause. "You didn't have to come back, you know," she added. "I didn't do it for the job," Elijah said. "I did it because she needs to see what trust looks like, in the small moments." Veronica looked down, then nodded. As they stepped into the elevator, Amara turned around. "Miss Hale." "Yes, do you want to come to the used bookstore with us Saturday?" Veronica blinked, then smiled, soft, genuine. "I'd like that." Amara grinned. And just like that, the elevator doors closed. That night, Veronica stood on the rooftop garden, again alone. The table was cleared, the cake was gone, the music off, but the warmth lingered. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the card Amara had left on the table, a drawing 3 people under, string lights, one tall with curly hair, one small with a bow, one with very long straight lines for hair. Below, in large print, "Thank you for seeing me." Veronica held the note for a long time, then folded it carefully and placed it in her wallet between her father's old business card and a faded family photo she hadn't looked at in years, because birthdays weren't always about candles or cake. Sometimes they were about presents, about showing up when it mattered, and sometimes the people who heal us the most are only 9 years old. Elijah Brooks didn't ask for a new title, but he earned one. 3 weeks after his quiet reinstatement and the rooftop birthday, Veronica Hale stood before the executive staff during the quarterly review and announced a new division internal systems reform, a department not focused on slogans or restructuring charts, but on the people who kept the place standing. And she made it clear. The person leading it would not be someone who climbed the ladder the usual way. "This is Elijah Brooks," she said, gesturing to the man beside her now in a pressed gray button-down sleeves rolled clipboard in hand. "What most of you don't know is that he's been fixing this place long before anyone gave him a title." There was silence, then cautious applause, then a few nods from those who had seen him in the break room, who had noticed that the flickering lights stopped flickering, and the vending machine finally took dollar bills again. But Elijah didn't say much that day. He just looked at the staff in the room and said quietly, "I'm not here to make the company look good. I'm here to make it work." The first week, he didn't call meetings. He walked floors. He talked to the overnight custodians, the cafeteria crew, the exhausted analysts who stayed past 9 p.m., the parents who had to leave early to pick up kids but never felt comfortable saying it out loud. He carried a notepad, wrote everything down. Didn't speak unless it was necessary. By the end of the second week, schedules were different. The single dad from IT no longer had rotating late shifts. He worked 10 to 6 now and picked up his son after school. The night shift janitors found a new break room on the 11th floor, cleaned out, stocked with basic snacks, soft lighting, a reclining chair, and a sign on the door. Night people matter too. Nobody saw Elijah install the sign, but everyone knew who did it. Veronica noticed the change, not all at once, but in moments. One morning, she arrived early and found fresh coffee already brewed in the shared executive lounge, even though no one else had clocked in yet. A sticky note on the pot read, "Remember to breathe before the storm." E. She held the note for longer than she meant to. That same week, she watched as Elijah stood at the whiteboard in a corner meeting room with Rosa from accounting and a junior analyst named Malik. He wasn't lecturing. He was listening. When Malik made a mistake on the process diagram, Elijah didn't correct him. He asked a question. "Does that feel like something you'd be comfortable explaining to someone else?" Malik paused, looked again, then corrected it himself. Elijah nodded. "That's how we build it." Veronica watched from behind the glass wall, arms folded, heart unsettled. Because she'd spent years in rooms like this rooms where errors were punished, where confidence mattered more than clarity, where mistakes were seen as liabilities, not chances to grow. But Elijah had changed the air in that space, not by raising his voice, not by giving a speech, just by showing up again and again and doing what needed to be done. By the end of the month, people stopped saying systems reform as a joke. They started saying, "Ask Elijah. He'll know." Rosa got promoted. Malik got more responsibility. The building felt different. Not because someone wrote a memo, because Zoe paid attention. One Friday, Veronica stopped Elijah in the hallway. "Can I ask you something?" He turned. "Sure. Why do you still fix the mailroom printer when you could just assign it?" He smiled a little, because it's still broken, and because the intern that uses it doesn't know how to file a repair ticket yet. She didn't respond, just nodded. But the answer stayed with her. Because for the first time in 2 decades of leadership, Veronica Hale was beginning to understand trust isn't built in meetings. It's built in mailrooms, in microwaves that finally work again, in break rooms where you don't feel invisible. And for her, a woman trained to measure worth in quarterly charts and polished presentations, it was disorienting. But it was also liberating. A few days later, she walked into her own office and paused. On her desk was a small wooden tray. Walnut, handmade, in the center carved carefully, "Some things are worth rebuilding." She knew who it was from. She didn't need a card. She sat down slowly, ran her fingers along the smooth edge, and for a moment, she didn't feel like a CEO. She just felt like a woman learning finally to believe in people again. Back in the hallway, Elijah passed a manager snapping at an assistant for printing the wrong draft. He didn't intervene, but he made a note. And later that afternoon, that assistant would find a new monitor on her desk. The old one had flickered for weeks, and a short email from Elijah People Notice, "When you try, keep going." Elijah didn't lead like most leaders. He didn't delegate to appear important. He didn't chase recognition. He just moved through the building like someone who believed it deserved better. And slowly that belief spread. Because people don't follow titles. They follow presence. They follow consistency. They follow the one person who walks into a room and actually sees them. One evening, Veronica stood outside the systems reform office. It was small, intentionally so. No corner windows, no art. But inside, Elijah and 2 team members were laughing quietly over something on the whiteboard. She didn't go in. She didn't need to. Because for the first time in 20 years, she trusted someone else to carry the load. And she wasn't afraid to let go. Because leadership is not about never being wrong. It's about having the courage to change when you are. And greatness doesn't come from being in the spotlight. It comes from those who quietly, steadily make the light work. It was supposed to be a drill. At precisely 9:30 a.m., the emergency alert system at Orion Heights Finance activated with a calm voice and a pulsing alarm. "This is a scheduled fire drill. Please evacuate using designated stairwells." Employees groaned. Coffee mugs were left half full. Heels clicked faster than usual towards stairwells. Interns clutched laptops. Some staff barely looked up from their phones. But Elijah Brooks didn't roll his eyes. He clipped his emergency checklist to his clipboard, checked comms with his team, and pointed toward the east stairwell. "You know the drill," he said. "Rosa, Malik, take your teams and head up. I'll sweep the sublevels." Again. Rosa teased. "Someone has to," Elijah said with a shrug. He was already halfway down the basement stairwell before the others finished clearing the lobby. He moved quickly, boiler room clear, electrical clear, janitorial clear. Then he reached the server substation on sub-level 2. That's when he saw her, a young woman crouched by a storage cabinet trembling. Her name tag read Emma Records Intern. Her ankle was twisted beneath her and her breathing was shallow. The alarm had clearly overwhelmed her. Elijah dropped to one knee beside her. "Emma, right." She nodded, tears in her eyes. I was trying to grab a backup file for Miss Geller, and the alarm, my ankle, then smoke." Elijah's eyes narrowed. Smoke. He looked down the hallway. A faint, unmistakable gray wisp curled beneath the server room door. His heart sank. "This isn't part of the drill," he muttered. He tapped his emergency radio. "Command, this is Brooks on sub 2. I've got real smoke coming from server substation. 1 injured. Evacuating now." "Over." "Copy that," came the quick reply, sending real-time response. "Get clear." Elijah turned to Emma. "We're getting out of here. You okay to lean on me?" Emma nodded, terrified. He looped her arm over his shoulder, hoisted her gently up, and started moving. But then the lights cut out. Flames licked the edge of the corridor behind them, small but growing. And in that moment, Elijah wasn't thinking about policy. He was thinking about Claire, his wife, the night she collapsed, the night no ambulance came fast enough, the night he sat in a waiting room, praying someone would walk through that door. He remembered the ache of waiting, the silence that answers nothing. He gritted his teeth. "We're not waiting," he whispered. He pushed forward. Upstairs, the building had cleared out. Everyone stood at safe assembly zones. Executives checked clipboards. Phones buzzed. Veronica Hale stood in the command center with security watching the emergency monitors. "Who's still inside?" The technician checked the board. "Only one beacon active, sub 2. It's Brooks. And one other." Veronica's chest tightened. "Pull the camera feed. Now." On screen, black and white grainy footage flickered. And then it showed him Elijah, one arm shielding Emma as smoke swirled around them, pushing forward through a narrow service corridor. Sparks burst from the ceiling. The girl stumbled. Elijah caught her and kept going. Veronica's breath caught. Her fingers trembled. Her eyes burned. Because he wasn't doing it for recognition. He wasn't doing it for applause. He was doing it because he remembered what it felt like to be left behind. At the stairwell, exit fire crews met him. Elijah handed Emma over. "She's priority." He rasped, smoke staining his shirt and voice. They tried to check him too. He refused the oxygen mask. "I've had worse cooking pancakes." Still, they insisted. 10 minutes later, he was seated on the back bumper of a response van, breathing slow, eyes closed. Veronica appeared at his side. She didn't speak at first. She just knelt, eye-level hand clutching his. He opened his eyes. "I didn't mean to scare anybody," he said. "You didn't scare me," she whispered. "You reminded me what courage looks like." A long pause. Then, "That's who you are, Elijah, not just what you do." He looked away, blinking hard. "I just didn't want her to wait. I know what it's like." Veronica exhaled, her voice cracking. "You shouldn't have had to." She stood slowly, then offered her hand. He took it. That evening, the building buzzed, not with alarm, but with awe. Every employee had seen the footage. The man who once mopped their halls had just walked into a fire and walked someone out. Not because of a title, because it was the right thing to do. The message boards lit up. Brooks saved someone. Elijah carried her out. Didn't even hesitate. And in every break room, in every Slack thread, people weren't just talking about heroism. They were asking why it took fire for the company to truly see him. Because deep down, everyone recognized the truth. Real heroes don't wait for the lights to shine. They just show up, over and over again, until someone finally notices. That night, Amara wrapped her arms around her father. "You were really in a fire?" she asked, wide-eyed. "Just a little smoke and heat," Elijah said gently. She sniffled. "Did you save someone?" He kissed her forehead. "I just didn't leave her behind." Amara nodded. "You never would." At her desk, long after the building emptied, Veronica pulled up the footage one last time, paused it, right on the frame where Elijah wrapped his body around Emma as sparks fell around them. She stared at it, then clicked print, framed it herself, and placed it just beside her awards. Because some legacies aren't made of money. Some are made of moments when you could have walked away, but didn't. Elijah Brooks handed in his final report on a Thursday afternoon. No ceremony, no press release, just a quiet, well-organized folder delivered to Veronica Hale's desk with a single note clipped to the front. Everything that matters is working now. E. The moment she saw it, she knew. He didn't leave because he was frustrated, or ignored, or disrespected. He left because his work here was done. The systems reform team was now 5 people strong, fully cross-functional, and independent. The night shift had full access to the break rooms and wellness rooms, and overnight security reported 0 turnover since his changes took effect. But more than that, people looked each other in the eye again. Elevator rides were warmer. Interns asked questions without shame. Managers finally learned the names of the custodians who passed their offices every night. Elijah hadn't needed a campaign. He didn't change minds with speeches. He changed rhythms with kindness, with structure, and with presence. And now he was ready for something else. He was going home, not to rest, but to start again. Veronica found him 1 floor down from the main lobby in the maintenance wing, going over training materials with Malik and Rosa. She waited until he was finished, then said quietly, "You weren't going to say goodbye." Elijah smiled softly. "Didn't think I needed to." She looked at him. "You don't." "But I did." She held out a small envelope. He took it, opened it. Inside was a photo, a framed shot from the security feed the day of the fire, the one where he had shielded Emma with his own body. Underneath it, the inscription, "Real leaders don't stand out, they stand with." Veronica's voice broke just slightly. "I meant what I said, Elijah. That's who you are." He folded the photo carefully. "I never planned to stay. Just wanted to leave it better than I found it. You did." She reached out her hand. He took it, not as a boss, not as an employee, just 2 people who had learned to see each other in the right light. She let go first. And for once, for the first time in her life, Veronica Hale didn't feel afraid to let someone leave, because letting go isn't always a loss. Sometimes it's respect. The next morning, the entire building paused at 9 a.m. An email had gone out at dawn. Subject: dedication. Staff walked slowly toward the main lobby, unsure of what to expect. There on the right wall beside the community board and security desk was a new bronze plaque. Simple, humble. It read, "The Brooks Room, for those who fix quietly and love loudly." People stood still. A few took photos. Most just nodded, because they understood. He had left something behind, not a title, not a resume line, but a legacy of what happens when one man refuses to leave people behind. That Saturday, in a sun-warmed kitchen 2 neighborhoods over, Elijah flipped pancakes while Amara sang off-key to a jazz playlist. Veronica sat at the small table, her sleeves rolled, helping slice strawberries. She looked more at peace than anyone had ever seen her. No heels, no earpiece, no armor, just a woman present. Amara leaned over the table. "Dad says his syrup-to-pancake ratio is a national scandal." Veronica smirked. "Let's test that." Elijah grinned. "Y'all don't appreciate art." They laughed. No one mentioned work. No one said the word legacy, because the point wasn't to declare anything. It was to be there, fully. Amara passed Elijah her drawing, 3 stick figures at a table, pancakes piled high, sunlight pouring through the window. Below it, written in purple marker, "Us." Elijah's hand stilled. Veronica smiled. And in that moment, something settled into place, not as an ending, not as romance, not as anything grand, just as family. Because family isn't where you're born, it's where someone sees you and stays. Back at Orion Heights, the plaque gleamed gently in the morning light. Most walked by without a second glance. But some paused, some smiled, and some whispered to new hires, "You didn't hear about Elijah Brooks, let me tell you something." And they did. Because kindness, when it's real, leaves a trail, not in speeches, but in changed hearts. The story of Elijah, Amara, and Veronica may have come to a close, but the feeling it leaves behind, that quiet warmth of being seen, respected, and loved, lingers long after the final scene. It reminded us that change doesn't always arrive with noise or spotlight. Sometimes it comes in the form of a man who listens, a child who trusts, or a woman who learns to let go. And maybe that's what we all need, most not grand gestures, but the courage to show up for one another again and again. What about you? Have you ever met someone who changed your life, not with words, but by simply being there when it mattered? Have you ever been that someone for another? If this story touched something in you, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Share your quiet moment, or just tell us you're here. And if you'd like to walk with us through more stories like this of dignity, justice, quiet strength, and second chances, please consider subscribing. Your support helps us bring these voices to more hearts. Thank you for being part of this space. We're grateful you're here.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.